Thank you for having me. Yeah, Chi Miigwech. And we'll see you back here for question and answer, I think, at the end. Okay, so Ani Bojo. My name's Ansley Simpson, and I'm a member of Alderville First Nation. I'm currently living in Toronto, although I gotta say I'm looking for a way to get out, especially with the pandemic. I've been a singer-songwriter and musician for most of my life. Later on in life, I actually started performing and writing songs. I was quite late to the process of songwriting, which I'll talk a little bit about. So I would say probably the last 6 or 7 years, I've been intensively writing songs and recording albums and performing live. In the last year, I decided to start a record label. It's called Gijiwe, and I wanted to start a record label primarily because I didn't see a lot of supports out there for Indigenous musicians in particular. And I wanted to make sure that there was something that was up there not only for myself and my musician friends, but for sort of the next generation as well of Indigenous musicians. Mainly because I'm very lucky to be a musician at this point in time. And when I look back in history to other songwriters, they had a much tougher go. I remember listening to Tom Jackson speak, who is an actor and a musician, and he would have been working a lot in the 60s. He was saying that there were times when he wasn't even allowed to drink in the bars that he was being asked to perform in because he was Indigenous. And when I think about that, when I think about how hard they fought for space and how hard they fought so that I can, do a national tour or play a really nice theater space, I'm really, really grateful. And I want to be able to contribute something of substance back to make it a little bit easier for the next generation as well. So I'll talk a bit about that and sort of what I see as the major challenges moving forward for Indigenous musicians. Starting off, I guess, in an industry that is kind of crumbling, which can seem daunting, I think, and it can seem really devastating and hard. But what I actually see, especially as a musician that has fit more in the marginalized fringe areas of the industry, is that there's a huge amount of opportunity there. Because right now what we're seeing more than any other time in history is the walls of the music industry have crumbled, and the gatekeepers are no longer needed to move forward with sharing your material. Now more than ever in history, it's the easiest time to actually create music. You don't have to have really elaborate, expensive gear. Studios are less and less important. Often you just need a very basic and simple to use setup, and you can get professionally sounding material off of that, or at least really strong demos to then go into the recording studio. There's also complete access to all these platforms that used to only be accessible through record labels. So you can now create something really strong with music, put it up on your own Bandcamp site, work all of the revenue streams. If you want to, you can have it up on streaming platforms. You don't need a record label to be able to do that as well. And you can build your own fan base, communicate directly with the audience that you want to communicate with. I can reach out and communicate to, Indigenous audiences all over Turtle Island now. That's not something that the previous generation of musicians could do. And it comes with it. That's my favorite part, is actually being able to easily perform and communicate with Indigenous people, and to not have to perform for, primarily settler audiences, which may not understand my material that well. So I owe a huge service to the Indigenous musicians that came before. And I wanted to share a little bit of one artist in particular which is Willie Dunn. Willie Dunn is one of my favorite musicians. He's Mi'kmaq and I think Scottish-Irish in his background. He was not only a musician, he was also a filmmaker, he was an activist, he was a politician for a little while. But more importantly, he sort of identified really early on the importance of being able to tell our own stories in the way that we want to tell them, and he really targeted his audience. He didn't always just write for the Indigenous communities. He also wrote for everyone, and in particular the settler Canadian audience, so that they could begin to understand and learn some of the hardships and devastation that colonization did. So he's actually responsible for what is the first music video ever done in Canada, which I absolutely love. So I thought I'd play a little bit of that and tell you a little bit about it. So I wanted to play the Battle of Crowfoot for you, which is Willie Dunn's first ever music video. And he did it, I believe, there's a lot written on him and you can read more and find a lot about him online if you're not familiar with him. But he wanted to create a film that sort of showed the devastation of colonization as it spread across Canada. And he did this film this video by gathering historic footage, archival footage. He dug into, he went to the Library of Canada and pulled out like visual images of that had been buried for generations and kind of forgotten about. And he folded that material into his own video and his own telling of the Battle of Crowfoot. And he did this all in 1968. There wasn't really a formula back then for a music video. I mean, they were sort of unheard of. I don't think much music or like MTV were around or anything that would have played it. So this was played at a lot of film festivals and sort of billed as a short film. It can be quite challenging to watch. I do think you're all older students. I wouldn't show this for a young audience because these images are real. And they're some really challenging ones. They do show the devastation of smallpox hitting our communities. And so there's images of that as well. And it's all real. So I want to kind of warn people about that before I play it, but I still want to play some of this for you. And I'm going to share that now. So this is Willie Dunn and the Battle of Crowfoot. Let me get it started. Okay, just stop it there. So yeah, that was Willie Dunn's Battle of Crowfoot. A section of it, it's a 10-minute song film collaboration that he did. It's incredibly powerful, as you saw, and it was one of the first things that would have been available for, the average Canadian to kind of hear the Indigenous side of what happened. Because of course, this wasn't taught in schools until very recently. You're one of the first generations that I think of Canadians who has learned about residential schools and about the treatment of Indigenous people during colonization. So, that to me inspired me as an artist to make sure that when I shared my stories and when I shared anything about my life or my nation or, I'm Anishinaabe, anything about my culture, that I did it on my own terms. Because what I saw in that previous generation was they decided first and foremost what was important to them, what had meaning. And they then sought to share it in the way that made sense to them. They didn't wait for someone to ask them for content. They didn't wait for someone to reach out and say, hey, can you do a film on this or talk on our TV show and interview? And that was primarily because back in that stage, if you were Indigenous, you really didn't make it into media. There weren't reporters that were Indigenous, everywhere covering things. Today it's much better, but we still struggle to have representation in the media in particular. So they would get you to speak about things, but it was rarely about anything of substance or importance to Indigenous peoples. So, you know, often you'll see back in the 60s and 70s, Indigenous people dancing for the opening of some sort of Canadian thing, but no one is saying anything. No one's sharing stories. It's sort of like just sing and dance, be happy. We'll pretend like everything's fine. Let's not get into it though. That's really, you know, that's not for now. So the last generation, and what I see continuing today, is that Indigenous people have really decided that we want to share our own stories. We want to make sure it's relevant to our communities first and foremost today, what we're sharing, and we want to be in control of how it's shared. And that's an incredibly important thing as you're starting off, because what I saw in particular in the Canada 150 year, which was this year where everybody's celebrating 150 years of Canada, there was a lot of funding that was put into showcasing Indigenous arts and music. We were getting a lot of offers for shows, a lot of interviews, all of these things were happening. But they weren't, there wasn't a lot of support there, in particular for Indigenous youth that were thrown into the spotlight to support them as to how they can handle that. So what was happening is that a lot of young performers were suddenly being the spokesperson for their entire nation, their entire community, and they were being asked incredibly difficult questions around, you know, youth suicide issues, or missing murdered Indigenous women, or, you know, it was all these trauma-based stories that were starting to, that the media really just wanted to hear about. We want to get, you know, we want to get in there and figure these things out. But really what our communities just wanted to do was share our work, share our art, and be asked questions about what we were creating, what we were sharing. And so from that, what I saw was a lot of youth then came out of that year really struggling emotionally, mentally, and it took a very, very big toll. And again, that was another reason why I wanted to start some industry supports like a record label, you know, start supporting these younger musicians so that they could decide for themselves what they wanted to share. I think one of the things that I wanted to really speak to today is to get across the difference between being a content creator, or being content for someone who is a content creator, and actually creating music, art, film, performance. A lot of what happens when you're approached as a performer is that people are looking for an Indigenous person to meet some sort of criteria or needs so that they can get some Indigenous content. But what they don't think of is what needs to be shared. What does that person want to share? You know, they don't think about, they don't see us as these multifaceted, talented, you know, creators that create on a lot of different levels and have actual meaning and stories to share. They see us as fitting into, you know, this content piece. So one of the things that I really want to encourage the youth to do is to come up with their own boundaries and their own ideas and concepts that are just for them, just for their community, just for your circle of friends, for your, you know, your home community. Start there. So really decide from the beginning when you are creating to create with those things in mind. Because if you create as a response to what someone else needs on the outside, it very rarely will it line up with something that really has meaning to you on the inside. It's also really good when you start creating art to understand what you're okay with sharing and what you don't want to share. As Indigenous people, we're often, you know, encouraged to share a lot of traumatic things. That seems to be a very reoccurring theme, but we're less often, we're not supported when we tell those stories. Often it's very traumatizing and surfaces a lot of intense emotions. And it's not necessarily what we want to do. Our communities are allowed to have joy. We're allowed to be, you know, doing things that are fun and celebratory, right? And we're allowed to to have those moments and create them in ways that make sense to us, without thinking about how it's going to be used on, you know, the CBC, or how it's going to appear when we post it on Instagram, you know, that kind of thing. Or if some writer reaches out to you wanting a specific interview, I always recommend that people really understand what they're okay with talking about and what they're not okay talking about. For me personally, I have chosen to sort of share that I'm a sober musician. That's one aspect of my life that I feel is important to share and to talk about. I talk about my anxiety. That was something that really prevented me from performing for huge chunks of my life. So I'm okay with sharing that. There are other aspects of my life that I want to remain private, so I don't speak about that. I make sure if there's anything that I don't want to talk about, that if I'm being asked to be interviewed, or if I'm being interviewed, I make sure they know what I will and won't answer, or I simply won't answer the question. And I think one of the biggest lessons that you can learn as a musician, as an artist, is when to say no to something. If it doesn't feel right, or if it's not the right opportunity for you. So really understand how you want to go about sharing. When, you know, we've all been going through this bizarre pandemic thing for a while. And initially I had to say no to a lot of opportunities that in hindsight were not really good opportunities for me. I wasn't feeling particularly well mentally, emotionally in the early days of the pandemic and months. I wasn't doing a lot of creative writing. I wasn't able to write songs. I just was busy taking care of myself. You have to be in a really good place mentally, emotionally, to be able to perform and to be able to create, because it is exhausting. It does take energy. As much as it does give energy to perform, it takes a lot as well. So when I got about halfway through the pandemic so far, I guess, my sister, Leanne Batasamasek Simpson, who is also clearly from Alderville First Nation as well, she lives in Peterborough. She is a activist, a writer, musician, and she approached me wanting to work on some sort of project that would kind of get us out of our headspace, start getting us to share again. And so she had this idea to take a demo that I'd given her like a year ago, where I just used layers of my voice to kind of create this beat throughout the song. And she sent it back to me with a reading over top of it. And it was so beautiful to hear. It was so meditative and calming. I immediately wanted to work on it more. And I took that opportunity to work. You know, we didn't have funds for it, but we didn't have anything else going on. So we just started to kind of fold our energy into creating this sonic world that was somewhat protective, so that we could, you know, for ourselves, start to get creative again, but also end up with something really beautiful. So I worked with her on this. She spoke a beautiful segment of her new book, Nopoming, The Cure for White Ladies, over top of this track. And then I created a sonic landscape to sort of fit underneath it, mainly just using synth and my voice. I wanted my voice to kind of sound like geese flying. And then she took the project to another artist who, Chimeric Collective, Sammy, and he was able to do this incredible video for it, just again all isolated. He had his dad hand carve the titles for it. There was underwater performances that he had another colleague create, and it ended up being this huge sort of unfolding collaborative project that like fit and filled the space of what I think she needed and what I needed. And it ended up sort of translating as something that a lot of people needed, this nice, calm, meditative space. So I thought I would share a little bit about that as well, as a way to sort of demonstrate that Indigenous musicians in particular, we don't really fit a genre well. historically speaking, we share stories, we sing songs, we dance. There's all of these overlapping, there's visual art, and we don't really categorize it or separate it into just one thing, which is why you'll see often, like that Willie Dunn song, you'll see film mixed in with music. So in this case, there's storytelling mixed in with sonic composition, mixed in with visual components as well. And this was a collaboration between two Indigenous musicians and someone from whose history is from China. So there's like an inter-nation sort of feel to this as well. So let me just start this. This is solidification. We'll watch, how are we doing for time? We'll watch a little bit of it, maybe the first couple minutes. And again, I can share these links with people too, so you can watch the whole thing. And then we'll kind of get back into me talking. So hold on. There.
Once you move through cold, there is Pacific. Once you move through Pacific, there is Placid. Once you move through Placid, there is a condition of expanse. And it was in that condition of expanse that held me. I heard them singing above me. Mashkawaje fell through the ice to find quiet, to get out of the wind, to visit with Namegos. They all sang Mashkawaje stitches at the hole. They are so cold, they can't move. They are frozen stiff. The lake is their blanket. They all sang Mashkawaje is frozen stiff, still, calm. No one knows if they're coming back. They all sang Akawenze is fishing through the ice with a spear. They brought a line of beads. They will wait patiently. They will wait until Mashkawaje is done their visit. The singing and drumming came every night from a distance. Different choirs every evening at dusk, marking the passage of time, reminding me there is still love. You see, tragedy happened again. The details don't matter because the details are hopeless, overwhelmed, shut down. Know this. After 2 years, the best parts of me are still frozen in the lake. My limbic system, its best friend, the prefrontal cortex, and the hollow, pumping organ in which I keep benevolence. The only one that regularly comes to visit is Akawenze. In the winter, they park their truck on the ice, drill a hole with the auger and fish until the cold makes their bones crack. As soon as the ice is off the lake, Akawenze is back in their boat with a torch and a sort of pitchfork for spearing pickerel. In the dead of summer, Akawenze sneaks back before first light in their canoe, before their cottagers and their jet skis are out. In the fall, they sprinkle tobacco around me and sing. My world is muted. I look out. If something upsets me, I just wait and the upset passes. I sit beside. Sometimes I remember the other me before I was frozen in the lake. I remember caring and engaging and the sharpness of unmuted feeling. I remember a hopeless connection. I don't feel stuck, in part because I don't feel anything. Their song isn't wrong. The ice is like a warm, weighted blanket. My form dissolved. world when tragedy came, and if I am fluid, the ice is container. There are ashes in my eyes. I am so far inside myself, like Miss Squatessi on a full fast, inside time, pulled inside their organs, inside their turtle shell, inside the sediments of the lake, while the ice world forms on top, oblivious to the outside with body as lake. And there is solace in being cut off, and there is freedom enmeshed within that state. Know this, being frozen in the lake is another kind of life. Know this, it is unclear how long before I will be done with my visit. It is unclear how long visiting takes. Know this, visiting is more of a dance than an event. Akawenze is my will, Nanatik is my lungs, Mindamoya is my conscience, Sabe is my marrow, Adik is my nervous system, Asin is my eyes and ears, Lucy is my brain. I believe everything these seven say because ice distorts perception and trust replaces critique, examination, interrogation. I believe everything these seven say, even though. I believe everything these seven say, even though their truths are their own, not mine. I believe in the absence of my own heart, I will accept the hearts of these seven. The geese fly overhead in the sheer grace of a carefully angled formation designed to take them elsewhere. There are still stars. There are still stars.
All right. So that was Leanne Batassa Simpson, and I did the sonic elements for that. Oh, hold on. It seems to still be playing. There we go. Okay. So I wanted to share that with you as an example of what can happen when you take the time to sort of just, focus on your own art. Just for the sake of, yourself, for what you want to do. Art can be incredibly therapeutic, and it can be really helpful to help you to process emotions and, of course, work through things. And that is definitely what this project allowed all three of the film, all three of the artists involved to do. And it became an incredibly therapeutic project for us. And I think the results show at the end of it that it's this kind of different creative expression that maybe doesn't fit into the normal categories, but when you start to do things that haven't really been seen or heard, they grab people's attention and hold it a little bit longer, and you can get more of your message across. So with that being said, you have to be in a good mental emotional space to be able to create art. I think one of the biggest myths that I have seen in our society is that art comes from these dark, tormented, angst places. And yeah, some art does, but that's not sustainable. The best art and the best art that I've created and the best songs that I've created have come from places of clarity, peace, balance, health. So those things really have to be in place for anyone to be able to do anything in their life, but especially art. Because you cannot, one of the biggest things that I see in musicians today is burnout. The schedule and the demands that are put for musicians in particular to be performing, you're always on You know, when you're on social media, you're on. When you're you know, we do all of this ourselves, mostly, from social media posts to managing our, you know, schedules, getting ourselves to performance, organizing bands, performing. There's so much of it, and it's so exhausting, and it happens mostly behind the scenes, that if you don't take time to really rest in between, recharge, space, and pace yourself, you can be buried pretty quickly with this. So really make sure that when you're starting off, that you have built into your practice rest, and yeah, and taking good care of yourself, like just making sure you drink water, eating well, sleeping well. Those sort of things become really key to being able to sustain this throughout your life, if that's, you know, your goal. I thought I would just take a little bit of time to talk about my most recent project that I've done. Was actually, I started it 2 years ago, and it was to be part of this Indigenous run TV series called Amplify, that's airing now. I think actually the last episode just aired on Friday. So it's done by Shane Belcourt, and the whole series is called Amplify. And what they do is they followed around Indigenous musicians through the whole process of writing a song. And they asked us to come up with something that had meaning to us. And initially, I wanted to do this project right off the bat, simply because I trusted the people, and I knew whenever I'm involved in an Indigenous-led project, I feel really supported by it. I don't feel like I can trust them in a deeper way, and it doesn't take as much time and energy for me to explain sort of culturally the context of different things that I'm doing, so people understand my work right from the beginning, and I'm supported. So I had chosen to do my episode on a book that Harold Johnson had written called Firewater, and it was all about sobriety. At the time, I was 2 years sober. I'm now over 4 years sober. And I was really wanting to hold on to anything at all that would build my sort of sobriety toolbox to maintain it, because yeah, being sober was something that is important to me. It allows me to be able to do the work that I do and to do it well. So yeah, we started into this project, and the team sort of gave me the ability to do whatever I wanted to do within, you know, the parameters of budget, that sort of thing. But I felt really supported by that. So I was able to pick some key musicians that I wanted to work with. We, you know, were able to go into the studio that I felt the most comfortable in. We recorded on tape, which was very exciting, because I wanted this to be sort of a throwback to Willie Dunn's era in particular. And if you'll notice, for sound quality of things in the 60s and 70s were recorded on analog tape, and it creates this sort of warm, almost buzz to it that is like an instrument on its own. So I wanted that sound to be there. I found a sound engineer, Annalise Nerona, to work with me on it. And she brought her skills of digital and lined that up with the analog tape. The whole song was produced by Simone Schmidt, and I had Heather Kirby on bass. She did all of the bass for it. So this will be the last thing that I show you guys, but this is my most recent single, and I think a really good example of what you can create when you feel safe enough to share aspects of your life with, and for me, that meant having an Indigenous-led project there to support me, and sharing it for an Indigenous audience. So this aired on APTN and is up on their site. You can watch the whole episode if you want, but we'll just watch the video from it at the end. So this is my song, Firewater, and my daughter, Mikomika, is also acting in it. She's super cute. So yeah, let me share that, and then we'll get to some questions.
One, two, three, four. I'm barely sleeping as it is. The night comes out to swallow me whole. There's no more whiskey keeping peace. There's no more trouble than my soul. I'm barely breathing as it is. Through smoke from fires you left ablaze, I watched you slowly fade to black, and I drank to drown this burning rage. Break my skin with rivers' waters, turn my silence to song, send a runner, find our women, build our nations back where we belong. Between this land and liars, they stole our children, taught them sin, left water made of fire. Douse the flames with rivers' waters, heal our wounds with drones, send a runner, find our children, build our nations back where we I'm barely sleeping as it is. The dawn comes out and warms my bones. There's no more whiskey stealing peace. There's no more trouble than my soul.
All right. So that's the last thing that I'll share. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. Yeah, it was really good to see that one. I'd forgotten a few elements. One of the things was combining jingle dress, some traditional elements, and I whispered like an inaudible prayer in there as well. That was just kind of for me and what I felt needed to be there for medicinal elements. So yeah, that's what happens when you can do a project based on, yeah, that's Indigenous led. Mm-hmm. Hello, Dean.
Hello, Ansley. Chimi Gwech for that. This was such a powerfully stirring presentation because it was so personal, and I think it's a fantastic invitation to the youth that are watching to see that art is more than just commercialization or more than just to sell something. That it's a part of your soul. And I have, one of the teachings I've received when I receive a gift, that I have a responsibility to nurture that gift. And I feel that you've all just given us a gift today, not only with your story, but the visuals that you've shared as well.
Ah, miigwech. I'm happy to share. Yeah, because it's what I love to do.
It comes across, Ansley, it comes across very clearly. For the next part with the questions, did you want me to read them to you, or are they popping up on your screen?
I am seeing them. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm seeing them pop up. Thank you, Denise. Denise said I was a good singer. It took me a very long time to be able to sing in public. My anxiety really prevented me from singing in front of anyone other than family and friends. So I worked with a vocal coach to be able to find sort of my voice and strengthen it, and then get used to it because I wasn't used to hearing myself that way. Ben Newell asked, how long did it take to make that song? So it actually took a very long time for me to write the lyrics. At that point, I just stopped. I just been back from a national tour, which was tiring, went directly into the studio, recorded my entire second full-length album, which is She Fell from the Sky, which is now going to be coming out in May. And I was burnt out completely and not doing well emotionally. So this was the only project that I worked on that winter. And I would love to say I just sat down and wrote the lyrics, but no, that's not the case. That's not something that ever works for me. So it probably took me a couple months to write those lyrics. And then the music part always comes a little faster because as I'm writing the lyrics, I can start to hear the music and then I can kind of play it back and forth. The studio, we were in the studio, so we recorded it on tape in one day. So what that meant is that we'd rehearse 2 days leading into the studio with the two other musicians. I was on guitar, Simone was on guitar, and Heather Kirby was on bass. So yeah, we had 2 days lead up and then like 2 couple-hour kind of practice sessions. And then in the studio, we had a full day to get set up, record everything. And when you record on tape, you can't cut it or edit it the way that you can for digital. So it has to be all in one take. So you have to get a take where everybody plays perfectly. It sings perfectly. No pressure. So it took, we were lucky. I felt really lucky that we got it in that one day. Yeah. So, oh yeah, don't give the master tapes, Jonathan McKay, to UMG. Honestly, I highly recommend that you never sell your masters. What happens when you write a song and when you start working with maybe a record label or a music publisher, the industry gets very, very complicated, and it can be very easy to accidentally give the rights away to all of your music. So getting relationships with other musicians and asking them questions if you are approached by labels is helpful so that you don't make any of these mistakes. It happened to a lot of really good musicians in the 70s. Willie Dunn, who I played, lost his masters. And it took a lot of work and years to get some of that back. Buffy St. Marie went through it, right? So if you lose your masters, you lose the rights to your own songs. So yeah, hold on to your music, keep it as yours. Where can we find more of my music? I'm on Bandcamp. I highly recommend that if you can support artists, support them through Bandcamp. It's like our only platform right now that actually pays anywhere near living wage. Spotify doesn't pay anything. It pays it pays 0.0003 cents. So it pays a fraction of a penny, which doesn't even exist anymore. So if you have 100,000 listens, you get $3. So that's not livable. We can't live off of that. The way musicians were surviving before the pandemic was through performing and live music sales at performances. So people buying records or whatever their merch. So definitely support people through Bandcamp if you can. Yeah, so I'm on Bandcamp, Ansley Simpson. I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I'm on all the platforms, really. Yeah. Yeah. My YouTube channel is Gijiwe. So let me just see. I think I could probably share my channel. Oh, this is just, okay, I'll share it maybe later with everyone. But it's on, if you go to Instagram, or if you even just put Ansley Simpson, there aren't many Ansley Simpsons, so into any search engine, you'll find my YouTube, Facebook, everything comes up there. And this will be posted on, I think, the school board's, the school board's YouTube. So let me see.
It'll be on our department YouTube channel, Ansley, and I will put any links on there that you want, and I won't put any links on that you don't want.
Okay, sounds good. No, you guys have been great. Here's a question from Zarisha Khan. I think I got your name right. Apologize if I didn't. When did you first realize you had a passion for music? I think I realized pretty early on. I loved music. I would sing a lot as a kid. My mom was also a piano teacher. My dad was very musical, but my parents, God love them, just kind of discouraged us away from it because they knew how hard it was to make a living. And so I didn't really do anything with it other than just playing for myself until the last, I think, 7 years. And then I just decided that I don't recommend anyone get into the music industry for money. Get into it because you like the art and the creation process of making music. And that you have something to say through that music. And that's just because as soon as you make anything in life your profession, it changes it drastically from something that's, fun and uplifting to something that then has this pressure around it of, you've got to bring food in and pay your rent and that sort of thing. So I've been very lucky to be able to balance the two. And I think I constantly remind myself that I got into this to create art and music and not for money. Yeah, okay, so there's going to be, yay, I appreciate that. Does anyone have any other questions at all about, anything, I guess? Yeah. Let's wait and see. Yeah. Well, again, I absolutely appreciate everybody tuning in and listening today. It didn't feel lonely and isolated. I could feel people watching, which was good. Yeah.
Andrea, I just wanted to ask a question about the recording process, since you were using tape and you were going essentially live from the floor.
Yeah.
Were you using an ambient mic, or did you have certain instruments going directly? I was going to say a board, but I don't know how the board would look using tape. But I'm just curious about how, with sound bleeding in to what everyone else was doing, how much of that you were going for and how much of it you were trying to control.
Yeah, that's always the sort of main question that you ask yourself when you go into recording something. So live off the floor means, in essence, you've got your band sitting there in the same room and everybody's playing at once. And so you can either set up mics in front of their instruments or in the room to capture the room sounds, or you can plug those instruments in to the soundboard or through amplifiers to get sound directly from the instrument. Or you can do a combination of both. And so for tape, what I believe we did a digital backup just in case. So we did have some things going to the digital board, but we used a lot of different kinds of mics to get sort of the reverb and sound quality that we wanted to. I recorded that in quite a big room. So the reverb that you're hearing, the echo that you're hearing is fairly natural. And then we used, I can't remember the exact mic, but as part of this Amplify series, they actually interviewed my sound engineer and the producer, all of us actually, and we kind of dive into that a bit more. And they do show the setup in it as well. But yeah, we had to deal with bleed, meaning that if you didn't like your guitar take, that's too bad we're using it, because all the other mics picked up on it instead. So we had to do, I think we did about 4 or 5 run-throughs of the song until we got a take that we really liked. And then we built some layers using tape onto that. So I added the jingle dress layer, which is, you can kind of hear it as a percussion sound. After the fact, I whispered a prayer. I added some harmonies. That was all done in layers afterwards, but the core music was done in one take using the sounds that we got from the room.
Miigwech for that. I know it was a technical like question, but
That's good.
Well, I wanted to give a sense to people that listen to music that's coming out right now, that they probably don't realize how so much of it sometimes is controlled note by note on whatever the software is being using. So it's a whole, and you know, you've been very brave in sharing your anxiety with us. Mm-hmm. That's a whole new level of invitation to anxiety for everyone involved, because you're, what level of perfection are you looking for, and what quote unquote accidents are part of that process?
Oh yeah, there can be some really beautiful accidents that come through that I keep. And then like that middle project where it's my voice over and over again, that one I painstakingly placed each note in time to a click that I saw visually. So that was about, I think I had about 32 different tracks running at the same time, of layers and layers of my voice over layers of synth that was then, you know, lined up with her spoken word. So it can go either way with anxiety. But what I decided earlier on is that if I'm going to be anxious, I might as well do the things that I find fun and interesting, since the anxiety is there if I'm just sitting at home or walking to the grocery store anyway. So let's just do things. And I got a lot of help for it too.
Oh, that's a great story. Be glad for that.
Yeah.
So I think Sheila has a question, and maybe that would be it for the afternoon.
Sounds good. Yes, I am definitely, Buffy has been a real huge influence, I think, on most Indigenous musicians, because she blazed her own trail through it. She was blacklisted for like 10 years from radio and commercial industry, and she just did her own thing, and she's still doing it. You know, like she's up there for years and she's still putting out relevant, strong music. So yeah, she's absolutely an icon that I think everyone kind of looks up to. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So Jonathan had, I think, a technical question that if we have time. Master tapes usually have separate instruments and then you mix into one, and then later on you can remaster it. So yeah, the mastering process, my bass player is an excellent a mastering engineer as well, Heather. So she took the tracks that we had done on tape. They are somewhat altered to like digital form so that you can then slightly alter things, but there was very little done to them in mastering so that we could keep the clarity of what we'd created sounding as alive as possible. So yeah, we didn't use a lot of mixing or mastering, although it was tweaked a little bit as we went through.
And so on that note, Ansley will say Chini Gwech again. Willellen. Yeah. This was an absolutely, I'm not overusing it, this was a beautiful session between your passion and the technical part and the intellect and the heart. Like you brought it all in. I'm sure there are going to be students that will be inspired to continue with their own artistic inclinations, and those that will listen and watch a little differently. And hopefully we'll go and check out your stuff.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. And just keep making things. Start making things. It's fun.
And I'd like to say at this point, Chimi Gwech, Shulalia, to all of you that joined again in a respectful way. And so appreciative. You know, if I can feel it on my end, you know, I can make a leap and probably hazard a guess that Ansley has felt it as well. And so thank you very much, Ansley, and everyone else. Take care of yourselves, stay safe. And any parting words, Ansley?
I'd say just start making things. Yeah. And then share them. Yeah. Reach out anytime. I'm there.
All right. We will. Take care of yourself.
All right. Take care, everyone. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.